Watching Kyle's unboxing videos again?
Yeah, he always finds the coolest... No way! A robot dog? Gotta ask where he got it.
Or use your Samsung Galaxy S24 Ultra. Just draw a circle around the dog on your screen, and it shows you where to buy it right in the app.
Whoa, I just learned a new trick. And that for once, I beat Kyle to the next big thing.
Circle it, find it with the new Galaxy S24 Ultra and circle the search with Google. Get yours now at Samsung.com. Internet connection required. Results may vary based on visuals.
Bare naked, bare naked, bare naked. ABCs. Welcome to the Bare Naked ABCs, where we discuss every Bare Naked Lady song from 7 to Y. Sometimes we agree with each other, sometimes it's polite banter, and sometimes it's a full-out war. We will have to wait to see what it is tonight. Hopefully it's not the last one, as we discuss the song The War on Drugs. Tonight, joining me, I have Betsy.
Hello.
And we have a guest joining us, Jay Shifman, who is the founder of Choose Your Struggle, a company that focuses on issues of mental health, substance misuse and recovery, and drug use and policy, and an expert on the history of the war on drugs.
Well, it's great to be here. Thank you so much to both of you for having me, and excited to talk about two things that I both love. Well, in one case, don't love, and that is the war on drugs, but do love the Bare Naked Ladies. And as you know, because we've been emailing a little bit, the reason I couldn't do this last week is that I was actually seeing Bare Naked Ladies at this time last Wednesday for the third time in my life, which was great. So yeah, excited to be here and talk about it now.
And what a song to talk about, perfectly matched up to the topic that you tend to talk a lot about.
Yep.
So just before we get going, we're going to talk about the war on drugs tonight, and here is a brief snippet.
Won't it be done when we rid ourselves of all these demons haunting us to keep us company?
And normally I would ask Aaron what album it's on, but he wasn't able to make it tonight. So I will tell everyone that this album was Everything to Everyone, or Everything for Everyone, depending on which time you got the CD. It was written by Paige Robertson, but I think that's more of a formality. Basically, Paige brought this to the band. He wrote it, brought it to the band, and then they did some major rewrites, which does give them a lot more of the writing credit, and I think that's where that comes in. And,
yeah, it's definitely a Steve song.
and Betsy, I have sad news for you.
No, dear.
This is the last.
I'm sitting down.
Yeah, this is the last song that we have to discuss on Everything to Everyone.
Aw.
Yeah.
Idoi.
Idoi is being put to bed after tonight.
Aw.
Yeah, I'm a little
there's
sad.
A lot more. There's at least another year ahead, so I'm not too sad.
No, but we're going to be hitting a lot of lasts in the next couple of months, and this is one of our first ones that we're hitting.
First last?
Our first last. So I think we still haven't hit our first last on like Silver Ball, so you know.
Yeah.
That will be so sad.
Now, how do you really feel?
We don't have Heidi or Aaron to give us our breakdown tonight, so we're not going to be able to do that.
Okay.
I will bring up some really important pieces that I noticed that we should talk about musically, and the first thing that I wrote down is that the string group that we mentioned for Upside Down and Unfinished have come back for this song.
Well, welcome back, Strings. We missed you.
And they do a beautiful job in this.
Okay.
You can tell the difference if you listen to the demo and if you listen to some of the other versions of this song that the strings are missing. And I do miss them. Jim does a great job with the arrangement on them.
Oh, yes.
And I'm trying, because Aaron unfortunately dropped out last minute, I am trying as we speak to see if I can pull up the website by Alan Fogel to get the notes and stuff for
He's
this.
a wealth of information, so.
He is, and I'm glad that we have it on here. It just takes me a minute, and I didn't have this prepared ahead of time. So while we're doing that, while that's loading up, Jay, a question I normally ask people the first time on, and I haven't asked you yet, is tell us about your trip to Bare Naked Ladies. Tell us about how you came to Bare Naked Ladies and how it got to now.
Oh man, I would say my earliest memory of Bare Naked Ladies would be when I was either late grade school or early middle school with If I Had $1 Million. That was definitely the first. But like most people, I think my love of them took off with 1 week and everything that came with that. The first time I saw them was that tour with I remember with my dad and my brother, and the thing that stood out about that was, I didn't know who the band Devo was, and maybe somebody else has been on this podcast to talk about this, but my dad, who is obviously older, got an absolute kick out of the band coming out for their encore dressed as Devo and doing Devo songs, and which I guess now that I've seen them 3 times, like, we know their encore or whatever, the end of their show is always something special, but we didn't know that at the time, and so that's definitely a early sort of formative memory, and I've seen them, like I said, twice since, including last week here in Philly. And every time they put on a wonderful show. And what's really interesting, I think, about Bare Naked Ladies is I know a lot of their music. I've got a couple of their albums on vinyl. I've been listening to them. I'm 37, so for at least 20 plus years. And every time I go to a show, I hear a new one from their older catalog, and I go, I've never heard that song before in my life, because it's so extensive. It actually, during this show here in Philly, what was very funny was they always, do audience participation, which is wonderful. But somebody yelled out, and you can help me with this because you're obviously the experts, a song from their Christmas album about an elf.
Elf's Lament.
That's the one, Elf's Lament, and the band lost their minds. They paused the show, doubled over laughing, and they said, that might be the weirdest request we've gotten this entire tour. We usually get some weird ones, but a deep track off our holiday album, to be quite honest, we don't even remember that song. So it was when the band themselves are cracking up, that something good has happened. So that was a really good time here at the concert last week.
That's pretty far out in left field. Yeah, it's very wrong time of year, and they probably don't play it live very much. So
no, they actually said that. Like I said, they said they don't even remember how to play the song, and they then requested, more requests as because they had their whole set, but they kept saying it's not like anyone's going to come farther from left field than Elf's Lament. So they kept pausing througut their set to laugh about it.
Christmas in July, right?
I guess so. I guess that's it.
I was able to find the tabs. Thank you, Alan Fogel, for putting this up here. These are the guitar tabs, so it's not the full layout. But I will give what I can here. This is a semi-2 guitar song. Ed plays his country gent, and Kevin plays the acoustic for portions of the song. Both of them capo it at 3. And sorry, I'm just reading.
We're singing, man.
Alan has a lot of notes here, so I'm editing out the stuff that's not important.
Yes, he's got a lot of information, so that makes sense.
Oh yeah. He says that Ed uses a lot of light trem after each chord is strummed on the album, and also might do it live. and Ed's guitar part has an echo on the delay of the quarter note on the opposite channel. So what we have here, I'm trying to go through. Unfortunately, he's showing the guitar tabs, so he's not actually giving me the chords and the breakdown of the chords, except to show me specifically how to play it, and that does me no good because I can't break that part down. But I will say they use E minor 7, A minor 7, D sus2, G F sharp, B7, E minor, and A minor. I know if I had one of our two music majors here, they'd be able to say, "Oh, well, it must be in this chord then." But I can't do that. So one of the notes that Alan makes, and I'll keep this in, is I think even Ed finds this song a little boring, or perhaps they thought it needed more without the strings. Either way, live, he plays a lot more than one strum per bar on the choruses. He also likes to add a lot of stuff to the verses. Play it how you want.
Yeah, the minor chords make a lot of sense given the tone of the song. It
does. And I personally really enjoy this song, so I'm sorry, Alan, I disagree with you.
I thought it was very pretty. It wasn't one that before you and I started talking that I was familiar with, other than I probably heard it on this album, a couple of times. What I found very interesting, and we can obviously get into this. This is the whole reason you have me on here, is that it really is more about mental health than an outright discussion of drug use or the topic of the war on drugs. But I'll say to your listeners, as a person who had multiple podcasts, one of which was an interview show, I worked very hard and multiple times to get Mr. Page on my show because he's such an incredible lyricist talking about his own mental health struggles, especially, let's give it up for Brian Wilson, right? Which I think is one of the greatest songs about depression, if not in my opinion, at least of the last, let's say 25, 30 years, it is the best song about depression. So, I think this goes right up there with that song, Brian Wilson. But it is more, in my opinion, about mental health struggles than it is outright talking about drug use.
Oh, definitely. And matter of fact, I guess we can get to that a little bit, because at the end, the only time that we hear anything about the war on drugs is at the very end of the song. And it could be that he's singing about the war on drugs as literally the war on drugs that America and Canada had in the 80s and 90s, and then continuing on so, but much less so. But I read it more metaphorically. When I hear him say, "It's hard to admit I fought the war on drugs," my take has always been, and he's never said anything one way or the other. So again, I think if we asked him, he'd be like, "No, I like the fact that people have their own take on it." But my take has always been, his fight on the war on drugs has been his own personal fight against using antidepressants. And that at the end of this song about suicide, he's like, "I can't believe for so long I fought taking antidepressants, feeling this way. And how silly was it for me not to give myself the help that I need in the process." Which then goes along with the "another died and the world just shrugged it off."
Yeah, because I think at this time, 2003, maybe they wrote it a little bit earlier than that.
No, he wrote it in 2003.
So I don't think he was into the cocaine at this point, maybe. I don't know.
Not that I know of.
Yeah, not that I know of either. But probably some alcohol.
And he had finally kind of come to some resolution around using antidepressants and medications to help with his bipolar.
I like that interpretation. I think, for me, my reading was that, knowing obviously that what he would go through in the future, I will say this as somebody who both is an active drug user and is in recovery from substance misuse and addiction. These things can be squiggly lines, right? It is not a linear progression in any means. And so, while it is 1,000% impossible that he knew he was going to be arrested for drug possession, it is definitely possible that he had other ill-fated whether run-ins with the law or just with his own use in the past, and I found that a very sort of poignant self-admission there. Tracy, I do like your interpretation. That's a beautiful interpretation of this song, and to me probably makes more sense than what I was imagining. But to me, it almost sounded like, oh, how dumb am I to think that I could be the one that could beat this, right? In whether it's me thinking back on my the first time I was arrested for selling, weed, I always thought I was going to be the one that got away with it, right? I mean, we all think that, and of course there is a bit of that feeling of like, what an idiot I was to think that I could fight the war on drugs, right? So that's kind of the lens I took it through.
No, that's a really good point. It's interesting that the song is named War on Drugs when literally that is the only mention of it in the last 3 lines of the song.
Well, I think what's for me, what that sort of rings true to is that, again, as a person who has spent the last now 5 years really focused on this, but before that, another 5 years sort of doing this on the side of talking about my own struggles about drug use as a whole, but in theory, the history of what we literally call the war on drugs. There is both a conscious in some ways, but also unconscious effort by a lot of people to separate drug use from mental health struggles, right? We kind of put these in separate buckets. And as someone who went through that myself, as someone who knows more people than I can count who are open about their own experiences and some people who are not, they're never separate. In fact, I've never met someone who struggled with unsafe drug use, misuse, addiction that wasn't also struggling with their mental health. I have met some people who had mental health issues that didn't use drugs. Like that does happen. But the other way around, not people. I want to make this very clear. I'm not saying every person who uses drugs struggles with their mental health. I am saying that every person I know who has struggled with addiction or substance misuse as a whole has struggled with some mental health stuff as well. And those two things go pretty well hand in hand.
Oh, yeah. And the DSM will even, the Diagnostic and Statistical Manual will even back that up. Like the overlap between those two things, like which started first, the chicken or the egg, like it doesn't matter. The two of them are connected in a way that you can't pull them apart. Like, and drug rehab or alcohol rehab, you have to deal with the mental health piece as well, because doing and focusing on just one will never work because they are so interconnected.
Yep, that is exactly right. And I will say this, that, a lot of the rehab facilities are, let's face it, they're not great, but the really good ones have incredible counselors on staff to talk and to work with patients on their mental health struggles, because self-medication is a very common thing. I did it. Pretty much everybody I know that went through this, that's where a lot of their use came from. A guy that I really look up to, a guy I was lucky to count a friend who's sadly no longer with us. The writer David Pozis was very famous for saying that the reason he used heroin is because he tried literally every antidepressant on the planet, and none of it worked to the level that heroin did. So it is the two are very married, and in a lot of ways, I think we are very quick to judge people who are using in ways that we would think are unsafe, or, and when it comes to certain drugs, again, like heroin, we are very quick to say, nope, any use at all is unsafe use, which is not true. But we are less willing to step back and go, is there a reason behind this, or sort of what could this person be looking for with that use?
And when I said this song only mentions it once at the very end, I should have said it explicitly mentions it, because implicitly I would say that the choruses are very much about drug use and the reasons for drug use. It's once again that mental illness part. Won't it be dull when we rid ourselves of all these demons that are haunting us? Like, yes, of course, we always say that we want to be rid of these demons and we want to live a happy life and we want to, we want to live to be happy like we always thought we were supposed to feel. But no one ever really feels that way, and everyone's always told that they feel that way. But then again, like we all strive toward that, or believe that we should have that. And then part of the reason that people, I think, approach and use drugs is because they are under this fallacy, this myth that life is pleasurable for other people and that it's a happy thing the majority of the time for other people. But if we got rid of the things that make us interesting and make us struggle, the things that make us who we are, then life would be dull and weird and
and we wouldn't have
uncomfortable.
like a good perspective of life either. We wouldn't really be grateful for things. We just take it for granted, I think.
Mm-hmm.
I think there are some undercurrents of like when she falls asleep in the tub. I mean, you could just fall asleep in the tub, or you could maybe take heroin, or maybe she took like some sort of sedative or something anti-anxiety, or, who knows if that's use or misuse. So I think it's like just subtly woven in until the very end. But yeah, there's undercurrents there, I think, of drug use.
And
I
again,
had never read that paragraph in that way. Sorry, that verse in that way. But looking at it and thinking of it, you're right. Like, I had always read that as a suicide attempt. Like, she's in a lukewarm bath, falling asleep in a lukewarm bath. Often people, I'm not going to go into the details, but commit suicide by being in a lukewarm bath because that encourages bleeding out and stuff. However, we're left to deal with the aftermath again. Like, it could be suicide, or it could be that they were using drugs in the bath, and the aftermath is them dealing with once again recovery.
Right.
And I think what I was about to say was that I think this once again just goes back to my point earlier of how great of a writer he is, right? That whether it's this one or Brian Wilson, which is not, as a kid, I loved the song Brian Wilson. I didn't understand it whatsoever. I just thought it was a beautiful song. But as an adult, I'm just constantly, every time I listen to it, I'm blown away by how beautiful that song is, and how well, Betsy, to use your word from before about undercurrents, he never flat out states, exactly what that song is about, but it's so well done that especially if you know Brian Wilson's story, right? And even to take a more, I think, esoteric one of their songs of When You Dream, which is such a beautiful song. And there's some really interesting points woven into that song that as a kid, I was just like, oh, this is so pretty. And as an adult, I'm like, wow, this is actually a lot deeper than I thought. And again, as a whole band, they're very good at that. But I would say Mr. Page is, again, one of the reasons I wanted to get him on the show is that he's just so expertly, he expertly writes these lyrics that make you think about different topics in different ways.
And he's so poetic in a way of being able to get you to feel how he wants you to feel by listening to not only the song, but to the lyrics as well, without directly having to come right out and say it much of the time. I mean, he does later on in the song say, that he's talking about mental health and suicide, but up until that point, he's only hinting around at the pain that she's in. But in those first two verses, he plays out her life, playing it softly with his song. And they it really gets you to feel what this person's going through. She had a soul and we ate it up, thrown away like a paper cup. Like, it paints that picture in 2 lines.
Yeah, I think that the line that really hits me the most is when he flat out says, like, I'm gonna butcher the line, but something like, "What would you do if you're living in hell on earth?" Right? Which, as a person who again has lived through both my own struggles with mental health, but addiction. And when I heard that, I actually went back to prep for this and listened to it like 5 times in a row. And every time that line just smacked me in the face, right? Because the song is very pretty. And then that song was just like, I was like, I felt that, right? Like that to me rang very true.
And then it starts to like really ramp up after that as well. It gets a little more intense.
Yep.
And so I'm going to jump over for a real quick to what Steven has actually said about this song, and then we'll continue this discussion, but I think this is a good spot to do this because they did this song on the iTunes original concert, and if you get a chance to listen to Steve talk about this, I recommend going over. You can get it. You can't get it on iTunes anymore, but you can get it over on BNL Archive. And just look through the album section, then go down through and look for the iTunes original concert. It's in there. But before that song, he actually talks about the song itself and writing suicide ballads. And he said that, this is what he wrote or what he stated. They moved away from suicide songs for Maroon, but then returned to it for this album. And the song was inspired by a bridge that's around the corner from him in Toronto. It's called the Bloor Street Viaduct, but the official name for it is the Prince Edward Viaduct. It crosses the Don River, and it leads from one side over into the Danforth. It was the number 2 suicide spot in North America at that time, and second only to the Golden Gate Bridge in San Francisco. And because of that, they built a cage around it, which they call the Luminous Veil. And they built that in 2003 when Steven wrote this song. It looks like a row of crosses with a lot of lines coming down in front of it, like a baleen whale's, like the baleen that blocks out the food and lets the water through. And I'm going to include a page that shows the picture and talks a little bit more about it. It doesn't look like the ones that we have here in Maine that serve the same purpose, but it was one of the first ones that was ever built. And Steve said that they were finishing it at the time, and he saw it kind of like as a fire sale, like the last few days to get a chance to do it before you were going to do it. If you were going to jump off the bridge, this is the time to do it. And that inspired the song, and it came out really quickly for him. He was thinking about how would Lucinda Williams write this and sing it. And originally it was just the same chords over and over again.
She likes to sleep with the radio on, so she can dream of her favorite song, the one that no one has ever sung since she was small.
But in rehearsal, he went out for dinner, and when he came back, the band had actually broken it down in the middle where it becomes very intense. And he originally was supposed to just be that ballad, just that kind of folksy type of singing. But when they changed it and made it more intense at that point that you were just talking about, Betsy, it allowed him to change up vocally in a way that it wasn't possible to do it beforehand. And he says because Jim did that, it gave him a whole new direction for the song after that.
They put a net there to catch their fall, like that'll stop anyone at all. What they don't know is when nature calls, you go. They say that Jesus and mental health are just for those who can help themselves. Well, what good is that when you live in hell on earth? And the very fear that makes you want to die is just the same as what keeps you
mean, and Andy, like they're both like geniuses at arranging music, which is something I didn't appreciate until I started doing the podcast, how much he really has that analytical mind, but also like just like this innate sense of what should be where and how to really build a certain feeling into a song.
I mean, if he hadn't built in the passion in that moment, if Ed and Jim hadn't been like, you know what, we really need to ramp it up right here, right now. Like by doing that, it gives that whole song a different feel and really kind of pulls at your heartstrings. When it's finishing on that suicide line, it's like, oh, it just tears your heart out.
Right. But in a way, it's kind of cathartic, I think. It's kind of nice to know that other people feel that way. And so you're not feeling so alone that, you know, if they're writing a song about it, clearly at least a couple people have also felt the way that you're feeling, you know, in that moment. So.
And I'm sure that if like Michelle or Aaron were, Michelle, if Heidi or Aaron were here to say so, like they would say like, well, it ends like when it goes back to the calm and more subtle music, we're still in that minor key. So we don't get resolution. We don't feel like at the end of the song, like that we're in a good space. No, he's, you know, another died and the world just shrugged it off. Like him, it sounds like a throwaway line, but it's not, because the way he says it, he sounds so defeated.
And I think it's meant to just kind of like sit there, like you should think about that, you know?
Yeah.
The world just shrugged it off.
Well, and it's very easy to feel that way. You know, I was thinking about this the other day. Everybody who does the work that I do and live through what I've lived through, like we all have lost people. That's just part of the territory. And you know, we have to figure out how to continue going about our lives. And yet for the sort of greater world at large, and even it sometimes, you know, the communities we live in, it sadly means nothing, right? It's just a statistic. And, you know, those numbers that we see every year of, oh, this city lost X amount of people, or, you know, the United States, for example, last year lost 120,000 people to overdose. That is a number that is so big, it literally means nothing to us, right? 120 people to us means nothing. And yet, if you actually look what that is, you know, a couple of years ago, this is my statistic is now a year out of date, because 2 years ago it was only about 105,000, which is the size of Topeka, Kansas. So if you think about it in that respect, that this country is losing one of our sort of mid-range cities every single year, and yet look outside, there's no riots in the streets, there's no marches, there's no nothing about this. We see the perfunctory comments from our leader, quote unquote leaders. Your listeners can't see me doing that. I have to do that every time I talk about elected officials, quote unquote leaders. But we see those comments, and people like us, we talk about it, and then we have to go about our lives, because there's just so little that we can actually do other than to continue educating and continue advocating for more funds and better treatment for people who are struggling, and a better understanding of, you know, things like I talk about of how the war on drugs, which, by the way, to sort of clarify, doesn't begin with Nixon. Nixon gives it its name that we now know, the war on drugs, but actually began in the late 1800s. How that led to people like me not getting the help that we needed, right? I gave a TED talk on that in 2021. The through lines are pretty obvious when you actually dig down and look into it. And we don't really realize that sort of a lot of the things that we think we know that are, number one, just flat out not true, but number two, accepted as fact, are why that is the case. And these things that we were taught in schools even, right? I mean, I'm old enough to remember Dare and Just Say No, which were not only, let's call it what they were, they were propaganda, but they were also sadly harmful. And what's so scary is that a lot of this has come out in the many years later from incredible research by some great journalists, that they knew at the time that it was harmful, and yet they did it anyway, because it was a way for mostly the Reagan White House, and before that Nixon, to continue funding law enforcement and other sorts of things like that, while also farming out you know, the sort of caring about drug use to communities and not have to worry about it in Washington themselves. So, these things that are deeply ingrained in our society make it really hard for people like Stephen Page to get the help that he needs, and instead he gets popped for some cocaine. Here's a guy who needed help, needed love, and it sounds like eventually he got that, and like you were saying earlier, Tracy, got the medications that he needed, but also got the stick, right? I mean, he also very famously was arrested for cocaine. So it is sort of the you get the carrot and the stick in this situation, when in reality, as incredible research has showed, the stick only makes things worse, and yet we keep doing it over and over and over again.
Yeah. And he wrote this song in 2003. We know that his cocaine bust was in 2008. Like, a significant period of time in between there where these lines of, like, won't it be odd to be happy like we always thought we were supposed to be, like, he's still chasing that even after he's written this line, and you'd think, oh, he's come to some conclusion. No, he hasn't. He still hasn't accepted that by that point. I would say that, like, his songs today and how he portrays himself today would lead one to think that maybe he's in a happier place and has come to some resolution around that. But we don't know. Like, if you had asked me at the time that he was arrested, is he using cocaine? I would have been like, yeah, of course he is. Like, look at him. Well, okay. I go back and I look at the way that he's looking in the photos, and I'm like, well, maybe he's just losing a lot of weight. No, it was showing. But I wouldn't have guessed that based on his mannerisms and behavior at the time. He is that consummate professional. I wanted to restart us off at this point with talking a little bit about this luminous veil that was created. It was a hard work that was put in by J.A. Birney. He worked for 5 years to get this put up. And even after 5 years of work with the city council, nothing came of it. And then in 1997, New York Times reported that the campaign picked up some sympathy when a 35-year-old man named Martin Cruz jumped off the bridge to his death shortly after a man convicted of abusing him as a child received a 2-year prison sentence, a sentence that was widely viewed as too lenient. The case drew national attention because the convicted abuser was part of a ring operated by employees of the Maple Leaf Gardens, formerly the arena known as the Toronto Maple Leafs. And at that point, Mr. Birney and Mr. McCamus reinforced their campaign with a lot of academic studies that showed similar offenses reduced incidents of bridge suicides in other cities. Such as the Duke Ellington Bridge in Washington, D.C., showed that the building of the barrier there in 1986 did not cause corresponding increases in suicides at the nearby bridges. And the barriers are actually those considering suicide. It forces them to pause and give them an opportunity to think about their predicament and then seek help. As a mental health professional, I will add that any experience that can stop or pause the moment of suicide, that is helpful. That delaying it even an hour leads to a significant drop in the likelihood that the person will attempt suicide. Suicide's an impulsive act, even when it's planned out and thought out ahead of time. It's built from strong emotions, which can't sustain long. So if you can even just delay it until that feeling wanes, then the chance of death drops. And to prove the point, deaths from the bridge have dropped to 0 since this luminous veil was erected. And the numbers in Toronto in general have decreased as well as the numbers of people dying by suicide by jumping from any of the other Toronto bridges. There was an increase for 1 year, and then all the other Toronto bridges suicides dropped as well. Science proves that when people read articles about people dying from jumping from bridges, more people do so the year afterwards. So even though Stephen states in the song that, they like that will stop anyone at all, what they don't know is when nature calls you go. the truth of the matter is these stopgap measures actually do work. Right now they're building one under the Golden Gate Bridge as well. It'll be finished this year, and people are like, why are you wasting the money on that? No, it does save lives, not just immediately and at that bridge, but in all the other areas around. It stops people and makes them think so that they then actually do get the help that they need.
Yeah, I think he said something similar to that effect of like, didn't he kind of, the way that the lyrics kind of read, it seems like maybe, you know, where they put a net there to catch their fall, like that'll stop anyone at all. I think, at least I think it's like it's live from home or at some point he kind of like recanted that a little. Like he said, you know,
I mean, in 2003, that was the feeling, that was the thought that people had. Like, this isn't going to stop anything. Like, they're just going to do it again, or they're just going to. No, the science backs up that it does work.
Yep. Yeah.
And I'm glad to hear that Steven's like, no, I recant that line. Like,
yeah. He did change his view on it later from I think what I heard.
Okay, I mic dropped on that subject. I apologize. But it's an important subject to me. Suicide and mental health are an extremely important topic, and so I do want to put it out there. Like, if you are having thoughts and feelings of suicide, if you're feeling extremely depressed, please, I know it sounds silly, but reach out to the suicide hotlines, reach out to the text lines. Just having that person there to talk to through that moment, through that long period of time, what feels like it's a long period of time, to decrease that emotion will help.
I don't think either of us could say it better than all that you said.
Thank you, Jay.
That's what I'm here for.
You know what's strange about this song is I was listening to it the other day and I was in a funk and I didn't really feel like listening to it, but the way it opens up, it almost feels like kind of like this warm embrace. It's like so like mellow, but it's also like kind of has this kind of glow about it when it first opens up. So that's kind of like the magic of Steve and like Jim's arrangement on this is it kind of lures you into like, this is, you know, kind of, it's okay to feel this way. And then it goes kind of through the, you know, variety of emotions that come with mental health. And then it kind of leaves that melancholy, but it kind of does take you on a journey, I guess, is what I'm trying to say.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, you start off, like you mentioned, like really ballady, very slow and quiet. And you feel like he's going to sing this song about this like happiness. We should know better with Steve.
Yeah, or if it's happiness, it's usually there's got a little salt in there with the sweetness kind of thing.
There's no salt in the sweetness. He likes to take that salt and just rub it in the wound as hard as he can.
Excoriate a little.
She likes to sleep with the radio on so she can dream of her favorite song. I think that's the happiest that you're going to get in the whole song, because from that point on, it's down.
Yeah, no, it's downhill from there. Yep.
Yeah, because then she's dreaming of this song that doesn't exist, so she's always listening for this song on the radio that doesn't exist. She made it up. So again, like this happiness that she can feel, she can never fully create. She can never fully get. Like in the very first lines of this song, he's telling us like she has unrealistic expectations of this world. But this world also is very cruel to her.
Mm-hmm. Right.
Also, looking at it, like when you open up the page and look at the lyrics for this song, this is a very full song.
You know, it's funny you say that because the first couple times, the first time I listened to it, when I looked down, I was like, man, like 5+ minutes, like that's a long song. And then you look at the lyrics, and not only is it a long song, but he packs a lot into that. And, you know, you almost wonder of like, could it have been even longer? And they were like, dude, you gotta cut this thing down. And so he was like, all right, I'm just gonna put everything I was gonna say in like 8 minutes into 5, you know. Because that is a common thing where, you know, the person will come into the studio with like a 15-minute song and they're like, nope, try again, and you end up with like a 4 or 5 minute song. So if this ended up at 5, whatever it was, 30, what was it when it started, you know, because there is a lot in there.
I mean, well, the topic of mental health is just packed as well. It's just as, you know, loaded, essentially. There's so many different types, and there's, you know, so many people suffering from it that there's a lot of material there.
He loves to go to that. He loves to go to that. He
goes to that
place as much as possible. But that's what I love about BNL is especially Steve, he makes you feel like he's not just singing about these things. He is going to bring you through the roller coaster of emotions during that time.
Right.
Now I love the original version. But there is another version that I really, really enjoy. It's not the demo version. The demo version is very basic. It's missing the key components. Obviously, it needs to be built up. They haven't done the build up yet at that point in that song. So there's a lot of pieces that are missing in that demo version. And I have it written down here they did put it on the Celebrity UK single as the B-side. He sings it less matter of fact. And the electric guitar is much more upfront with a little slight distortion in there. I like that they pulled that out because it allows you to focus on what's being said and have that music in the background to just kind of like lead you through the emotions. But here, I'm going to play for you guys my favorite version of the song, which brings back an old BNL favorite, because is it going to let me do it? Oh, it's going to let me do it. Because it brings back Andy Creegan. And Andy Creegan is directing the New Brunswick Symphonic. And he actually wrote the arrangement for the whole symphony. And of course, you have Stephen up front, and you have Northey and Fox in the background, and it's just gorgeous. I'm going to play that for a little bit of that for you guys right now.
She likes to sleep with the radio on, so she can dream of her favorite song, one that no one has ever sung since she was small. She'll never know that she made it. She had a soul and created it, blown away like a paper, use and falls.
Now that's fine. That's beautiful at the beginning. But then we get to the part where it picks up.
Jesus and mental health aren't just those who can help themselves. What good is that when you live in hell on earth? And the very fear that makes you wanna die is just the same as what keeps you alive. Oh, that's when
The feels.
Mm.
Oh, it's big when you have the band playing. It is huge when you have a full orchestra building your emotions behind that.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that was very beautiful.
I wish I had been there for that. That was one of my few regrets in my life is not being at that concert.
I'll tell you what, this though, if that's one of the few regrets of your life, you're doing pretty well, man. I'm very happy for you.
I try not to have regrets because you can't go back. But man, oh man, that one I can't let go of.
That's fair.
Yeah, so I guess I didn't realize it before, but he changed the word from "it's more trouble than your suicide is worth" in the lyrics of the actual CD to "some suicide is worth." I don't know if that's just to appeal to more people or keep it less specific, but yeah, it's interesting they changed that.
I wish he had kept it to your.
Yeah, makes it more personal.
Makes it more personal and really powerful, boom.
Mm-hmm. Like I'm talking to you, yeah.
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 Well, guys, I have exhausted my notes on this song. Do you have any more things that you would like to bring up about the song?
I don't think so. I think you covered it all pretty well.
You did do a very good job of covering it. I think that, my closing thoughts on this is that I would love to have an afternoon to pick Stephen Page's brain on all of this, to know, how much of this is coming from, personal experience, how much of this is coming from just the fact that he's a guy in this world. I mean, like the quote that I said earlier about, when you're living in hell on earth, that was so specific, but sadly, it's also really not. I mean, there are a lot of people who find themselves in a situation that would, find home in that lyric. And if, what do you say it was 6-8 years later when he was arrested for this, if this song hit different, and just to say, I guess, thank you for doing such a great job with this, and like I said earlier, with my favorite, Brian Wilson, but some others as well, of putting these thoughts and these feelings into song.
Well put. Yeah. So what you may not know, Jay, is that we rank every single song 0 to 5. 0 is we wish it had never been created, was wiped from the earth. That was kind of last week's song for me.
How dare you?
And then 5 is greatest song ever, belongs on your island playlist. You can't imagine the world without that song. And then, of course, anything in between 0 to 5. So my question, Betsy, is what do you think that we should give for a ranking system for this song, though? A meter, so to speak.
Yeah.
I want to be respectful because this is such a somber song. We usually go jokingly with this,
right.
But
how many what was the one? How many elf shoes for the
right? How many elf shoes? Or lion's ears, or
viaducts, maybe, or
okay.
or what's the device that they use?
Oh,
a halo
luminous veil. Yes.
Veil.
How many luminous
either
veils?
One, either luminous veil or viaduct, or I do love the wording of luminous veil is really pretty. But
I think it's interesting that he says that he mentions raining down on the cars and trucks below, and that particular bridge, there are no roadways below that. It's a ravine, but it's also a river. So he paints a beautiful picture that's not real.
Yeah, that would be probably more. Well, not even San Francisco is over water too, I would think, but
But yeah, I like the Luminous Veils. How many Luminous Veils do we give this song? I will let you go first, then I'll go and to give Jay a little bit of time to kind of think about what he wants to rank this.
Well, I think it's a beautiful song that is very well written and well condensed to kind of portray like lifelong struggles with mental health. So it's not always a song I want to hear when it comes on, because sometimes just I have to be in the right mood for it. But sometimes if I start listening, I'll just kind of, hear it all the way through because it is so beautiful. So I think I would give it 4.5 Luminous Veils.
Okay, 4.5 is extremely respectable. This is going to go with other songs that speak on such very powerful and heavy topics for me. So, when I think of BNL, and I want to introduce BNL to what they can do and introduce them to what they can expect. This is one of those songs that I would definitely want to play for certain people, to make them understand that they're going to have emotions listening to this band. The Flag, Brian Wilson. This goes on that list, and I can't have them on that list together without giving them the same ranking. I mean, is this a song that I want to listen to every single time? No. And the reason is there are some times that I don't want to be put into that space. But the fact that he can so accurately and immediately put me into that space to have to deal with those emotions says that he has done exactly what he's aiming at doing with that song. I have to give it a 5 for me.
All right.
I'm gonna go with 4. I think that I mean, Tracy, what you said is perfectly true. It accomplishes a lot. It is a very beautiful song. I will 100% agree with that. And I just think that, personally, I'm going to sound like a broken record here, but despite all of their hits, I mean, I love if I had $1 million and all that, but Brian Wilson is my favorite Beach Boy song, my favorite Bare Ladies song. This isn't quite that. If that's a 5 for me, if that is a perfect song, and I would even put, because I'm a weirdo like that, When You Dream up there as well, because it's just very pretty and imaginative. But I would say this falls sort of the rung behind that. I am delighted that y'all asked me to talk about this one, because, like I said, it was not one I was familiar with. And it gave me a chance to dive into it in a really cool way. It will definitely be on my playlist going forward. And, I'm glad that I've had this opportunity to learn about it, through your incredible teaching, Tracy. Thank you. But even with all of that said, I think it falls on about a 4 for me.
Excellent. Well, thank you. Jay, you have been an amazing guest, and you are a wonderful speaker. Obviously, you do it professionally, but you are very articulate with what you're trying to get across. Where can people learn more about what you have out there and see more of your stuff?
Yeah, thank you for that opportunity. I have 2 podcasts that are both currently on hiatus. One is called Choose Your Struggle, which was a three seasons of an interview podcast where I talk to people on the issues of mental health, substance misuse and recovery, and drug use and policy. Everyone from actors, musicians. Like I said, I worked very hard to get Mr. Page, and that didn't come to pass. But and a lot of incredible people who have firsthand knowledge, who are well learned in on those topics. And then I also did a documentary show called Choose Your Struggle Presents Made It Season 1 Stay Savage, where I told the story of one person in particular who went through an issue of mental health and addiction and came out the other side to create something beautiful. In this case, the person's name is Sarah Laurel, who I am lucky to call a friend. And she founded the organization Savage Sisters here in Philadelphia, which is a nonprofit, it's a harm reduction nonprofit aimed at helping people struggling with addiction, but also educating around these issues. And that was a show that was a lot of work to make, and it was a really beautiful payoff. The family has been just so kind, and a year later still talking that show up. Those all can be found wherever you get podcasts. Search for Choose Your Struggle, and those will come up. My website is jayshifman.com, JAYSHIFMAN.com. I do, like you said, I do speak on this, both professionally, but also, like, as you can tell, I care about it very deeply. I've gone through this, and during COVID, the first early days of COVID, I spent a lot of time working with people one-on-one, not for pay or anything like that, just being there as people kind of who before had never dealt with anxiety, dealt with these issues of mental health. All of a sudden we're going through stuff and going, oh my God, like this is different. This is real. So, I always say this whenever I speak, because as someone who lived through multiple suicide attempts, as someone who lived through an overdose, I wish I had reached out to people in that moment. So I always say to people, like, for real, reach out to me. First off, there's probably somebody in your life who loves you and would love to be there for you. If you really don't think that that's the case, I am always open to chat. You can find me on my website, social media, whatever. And both sadly and not so sad, people have taken me up on that offer. I've had random people reach out to me and say, I heard you on whatever show, heard you speaking at this place. I don't know how to talk about this issue. I don't know who to talk to about this issue. And I will never say it's something I like to do. Like, it's not, I don't get pleasure from it, but it's something I will do all day, every day, because, as someone who lived through it, I know how impactful it can be. So, definitely, if you're going through some stuff, please reach out, and definitely would be happy to talk.
And in the show notes, I will also be putting, there was an interview that you did on Michelle Kuai's YouTube show. Yeah. And also, I was able to find your TED Talk on YouTube, and so I'll be putting in the link for that as well. All right. Thank you so much for joining us. And guys, I gotta go, because there was this huge sunspot the other day that exploded, and like it was supposed to be hitting us all day today. So I don't know about you, but I want to be watching the Northern Lights tonight. They're supposed to be spectacular.
There it is. Yep. Every time.
That's awesome. Enjoy that.
All right. Thank you, guys.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Have a great night.
Thanks.
I thought you were going to say thanks. That was fun. I was waiting for it.
I got you to say it for me. Thank you.
Thanks. That was fun.
Thanks, that was fun. Don't forget, no regrets, except maybe one.
To celebrate joining Pantheon Podcasts, Rock Camp, the podcast, the official podcast of Rock and Roll Fantasy Camp, is giving away a guitar signed by Mike Portnoy of Dream Theater, Marty Friedman, formerly of Megadeth, and legendary shredder Zakk Wylde, plus our rockstar counselors like Vinny Appice, Monty Pittman, and more. To enter to win, simply follow, rate, and review our podcast on your preferred platform, and that's all you have to do. For more information, go to rockcamp.com/podcast.